Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron. I'm with Fleet Systics, and today we have Darryl Arnold with us. We are both residents of Florida, hurricane capital of the United States, I think, although in the last year or so, we've been very lucky and have been dodging bullets, at least in the Tampa area. And today we're here to talk to you about continuity of business, but also about how your fleet can be prepared for hurricanes and some of the things that you can be thinking about in order to get your fleet back in operation quickly after the storm. So thank you for spending some time with us. The first thing that we're going to talk about is really just staging your vehicles. What are some of the things that you should be thinking about if you are actually in the path of the storm? How do you protect your fleet? Because your fleet represents getting back to work, right? So, Darryl, give us some of the considerations for keeping your fleet safe.
Well, one of the first things that you want to make sure that you do is to fill up the vehicles with fuel. Even if you store fuel locally or have your own tank or pump or whatever, you're probably going to want to go out and use gas stations because you want to be able to conserve your fuel levels. It's not that there's not fuel available after a storm. The problem is that there's no electricity to drive the pumps to get it out of the tanks. So you want to make sure that your vehicles are full. And if you have local storage, conserve that. Keep it available to you so you'll be able to operate if there is some kind of a fuel shortage afterwards. Make sure that you park your vehicles in an area that wind-related damage, such as down power lines or trees, are not going to affect it. Very rarely do the winds and the rain from a hurricane actually affect a vehicle or disable it. It's items that are falling from above. So when you're deciding where you're going to stage your vehicle or where you're going to park them, look up. Make sure that there's no power lines nearby. Even a vehicle that hasn't been disabled can be, rendered useless if a power line falls in front of it and you can't get it out of where you're looking for.
You could also just have something smash the windshield, right? And you can't see to drive, and that could also be rock off the lot too. So it's hazards from overhead as well as thinking about what's on the ground too, and picking up any loose debris. If you're parking near a building and you got paint cans or garbage or things like that may be on the outside of your building, that stuff should get put inside so it doesn't turn into some kind of projectile that would damage a vehicle.
Also, if you're in a flood-prone area and you have the ability to park your vehicles elsewhere, it's probably going to be a good idea. Because one of the roads more often than not are blocked by downed trees and power lines and situations like that. So if you can get your vehicle in an area that is not as forested or have the types of overhead situations and park them there, it's going to make sure that the vehicles are available to you afterwards.
Something else that came to mind is we're talking about consolidating your vehicles. Well, if you do that, you've got to look at the flood area around your area. So even if your area is not likely to be flooded, can your people get back to those vehicles to actually go to work, or are you going to be on an island at the end of the day? The other option is to allow your employees to take the trucks home. So you're dispersing the vehicles to different areas, which is going to mitigate your risk of something happening at one particular location and wiping out your entire fleet. You might lose a vehicle here or there, but you're not going to lose your whole business because you don't have any vehicles. And certainly in today's age where it's hard to get vehicles back, it's hard to buy new vehicles due to the chip shortage. If you lost your fleet, you might not. You probably go out of business because there's no vehicles available to buy. Think about dispersing the fleet versus consolidating the fleet and figure out which one's going to work best for you.
The primary issues that you're going to encounter after a storm, and this isn't just related to the fleet, but also the operations of a business in general, is the lack of electricity. That's going to be the primary issue. You're going to have the ability to use the cell towers and cellular communication for a period of time. And generally speaking, after a storm, the power companies tend to prioritize areas that have cell towers to get it back online. But in some of our coastal areas in Florida, specifically, Fort Lauderdale is coming to mind. The power company actually shuts power down to buildings that are right along the river in the Fort Lauderdale area. So, make sure that you're communicating with your landlord or the power company to understand what the power situation is. I had the situation where I worked in a building, and after 3 storms in South Florida, they didn't turn power onto the building until 5 days afterwards, even though there was no damage to that particular area, and it was not flooded.
So, and that ties into bulk fuel storage. So if you have your own fuel, but you don't have a generator to power that pump, then there's no point in even having the fuel, because you won't be able to put it in your trucks unless you're siphoning it or have some kind of a manual hand crank, to transfer the fuel over. The other thing is, with fuel, schedule a delivery before the storm. So if you estimate that it's a Category 1 storm and you're probably not going to have too much damage, maybe you want to estimate that your fuel tank and your bulk fuel that you have on site will last 3 days. Go ahead and place an order to have fuel delivered on the 4th day. And at least you're on the schedule. It may not come exactly due to the other issues, but at least you're at the head of the line for fuel. And that kind of ties into, pre-positioning inventory as well. If it's going to be a bad storm, and let's say you're in the roofing business, I mean, there's no better example of an industry that's going to be busy after a big storm. If you're in the roofing business, you're going to need shingles and tar paper and nails and all those things that go into that. If you order that stuff and actually get it delivered and keep it in stock, staged nearby, when the storm passes through, you'll have everything that you need to go to work. And your competition may not have done that. Therefore, you're going to see a boom in revenue, because you have what's necessary to start solving people's problems, and you'll be highly successful.
Also think of your fleet vehicles as a source of power after a storm. With an inexpensive sine wave inverter, you can connect it to the battery on your vehicles. You have the alternator to recharge the battery. You can run laptops and small electronics like that. Would suggest considering a tablet versus a laptop after a storm, because tablets tend to run a little bit longer on the power that they have available to them, and they're also shorter times to charge them. Tablets are a little bit more energy efficient than a laptop is.
And if you see this is going to be a bad hurricane, then one of the things that you'll want to take a look at is, can you actually implement a paper process? Assuming that you aren't going to have power, assuming that the vehicles will have inventory on them, assuming that somehow you're going to be able to get requests from customers, where your technicians can go out and go to work. Can they operate on paper for a few days until the cellular and the internet and other things start to come back online? So if you can't do that, if you don't solve that particular problem, you may be sitting around on inventory, you may have people ready to go, but you don't have a process to capture the necessary information to eventually get it into your system so it can be billed later on. So that's a key little variable there. Darryl, what else are we looking at for contingency planning and being prepared?
Well, your GPS system is going to be a valuable source of information. A GPS system is generally an online type situation. So if you have a tablet or a laptop available to you, the minute that you start up your vehicles, the GPS devices are going to be powered and you're going to be able to identify where the location is. So in the aftermath, or even during the storm, if you need to keep track of your vehicles, where are they? What's happening with them? Rely on your GPS system for that, but just make sure that you have a way to access the internet to be able to get to that information. Also, the GPS systems can be used, unfortunately, after a storm. One of the things that you have to keep an eye on is security, making sure that your buildings and your vehicles are secure. And with a GPS system, you have the ability to put a zone around where your vehicles are parked. And if the vehicles are being moved outside that area, you can be proactively notified. So GPS is a pretty important tool during and after a storm because it's just necessary to be aware of where your fleet is. And then on top of that, you want to make sure that your fleet is remaining where it's supposed to, which you can use geofences for.
Sure. So we talk about decentralizing the vehicles, i.e., getting them out to the drivers' homes. What you don't want is a vehicle that is loaded with inventory, being used after 5 o'clock to go do more work, right? So you want to know that that vehicle is going to be parked at the driver, the employee's home. It's not being moved after hours. You're not making a bulletproof situation, but you're making it much harder. So in the example of roofing materials, if somebody had, a truck full of shingles and things like that, they would have to unload the truck or all the shingles and all the supplies and tools into another vehicle and go out and do roof repairs. And then they have to come back in the morning, they have to load it all back in their trucks, and then they could go work for you. That type of thing definitely happens. Fortunately, not too much, but you're making it more difficult for that type of scenario to play out, and you've got better visibility on how things are going. So, Darryl, do you have any final words of wisdom, or have we pretty much covered it?
The most important thing in doing your planning for fleet location for everything is to look up. Make sure that there's no trees or branches that can disable your vehicles or block your building. And also keep an eye on power lines. Those are the two biggest problems after a storm, and even a minor storm. Those are issues that have to be dealt with.
So really what you're talking about is let's get everybody in and basically create a rally point, have a meeting. Let's bring the drivers in. Let's bring the office and operations staff in. Let's get everybody together and let's do a safety briefing and focus on how are we going to operate and how are we going to operate safely, obviously with different hazards that need to be considered when you're out on the road delivering service compared to what you're doing in the particular office. Two more things that popped in my mind as you were saying that. One is, the telematics platform is going to be able to tell you what your battery voltage levels are in your vehicles. So you'll be able to take a quick look at that to see if you're going to have any battery drain problems. You'll also be able to see fuel tank levels. So if one of the drivers is running the fuel down and they're 30 miles from home, you might be able to catch that before they run out of gas and there's no gas in a particular area. Maybe you can get them back to the bulk fuel storage location. You can keep an eye on fuel slippage. Right. So any kind of draining of your company fuel tank into other containers to run generators and things like that, or just to sell it off is something that you'd be able to keep an eye on. So there is that type of vehicle status information that's available to you through the tracking and telematics platform. Okay, I think that wraps it up. We'll put some links to some references in the description below. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We are working to bring more of this type of practical application information to customers and hopefully transition or segue GPS data and tracking data from what you see online to how do you apply that in the real world. And if you can do that, then you're going to find your ROI every time. So thank you very much, and we will see you on the next video. Have a great day.